Guys, today I got a review on the HaloCam C1. Now, I've never used a HaloCam before. I have seen them around on Amazon, and people have asked me about them, asked if I would review them. But this time, HaloCam did actually reach out to me to see if I wanted to review this one. You can see here it came with a little thank you note. Has some tips such as what kind of memory card you're using. Here is just a quick start guide, shows what's included, some options, how to connect it, some basic instructions on how to use it. So, comes with everything on one level, it appears. Yep. So it is a cylinder type design, but it doesn't use an adhesive mount. It does use a slot type mount there. Taking a look around, got a power button right there on the back. It's just like a couple lights for Wi-Fi and recording LED. Got a power button and a rear camera. Now, I do have the rear camera, so we'll go over that later. So this does have the option for 2 channels. Here you can see a micro SD card slot. Other than that, it's pretty discreet design. Now, it comes with a adhesive mount, just the one option. Considering it looks sort of like a mini Blackview camera, I sort of wish it had a mount similar to Blackview as opposed to this little bell type mount where it hangs down. But at least, let's see. Fortunately, it does use a gray adhesive, so that's disappointing. With the circular mount, you might, if you want to get black adhesive or clear adhesive, you might not get a perfect cut for that, but whatever. Here we got this is a little Bluetooth mount or button, so you can lock files with it. I've seen several cameras with this option. You can see here there's a battery, some sort of watch style battery. Remove this to start it up. Strangely enough, the button comes with black adhesives, but not the actual camera. I find that a little goofy. You got this USB adapter. I don't know if you can read that. So you got 5 volt 1 amp on the top, 2.1 amps on the bottom. So I'm assuming you can probably charge the charge your phone off the 2.1 amps and hopefully power the camera with the 1 amp port. And then we just got the power cord. So, and this uses mini USB. So let's take a look at the rear camera. So you got a really long cable. Does seem to have a red cord to connect to a brake light, which is strange. It looks like a reversing camera. The reason I say that is strange is, so it does have IR lights. This is basically a generic backup reversing camera. So while I was recording that, I wasn't quite sure about this rear camera because I wasn't expecting it to be some sort of waterproof backup camera because, for one, there's no screen. And like I said in the caption, if you do connect the red wire to your brake lights, when you switch into reverse, it will actually turn on the LED lights and also add parking lines to your video on the app. But that doesn't mean you have to be running the app, viewing the live feed with the rear view showing, which to me is sort of inconvenient. I wouldn't ever do that. So I ended up installing this just inside of my car, and I don't plan on using the backup camera feature. It also would be hard just because the length of that red wire in my hatchback just doesn't really work out very well for me. But the option is there. It's $28.99 currently on Amazon, which is sort of funny because the camera itself is only $60. But either way, you can get a 2-channel camera for $90 with some pretty advanced features. Now, the only major downside is the rear camera is only 720p, and the video quality isn't that great. So, of course, we'll touch on the rear view quality in a bit. Now, looking at the video quality, I have to say I am pretty satisfied and happy with the front video quality. It does use the Sony IMX323 Exmor image sensor, so you know that's a couple years old, and there's been some companies that have offered just as cheap of cameras or pretty similar priced cameras with a newer Sony Starvis sensor. The Exmor one is the older one, but this camera does have about 14 megabit per second bit rate, which gives pretty good video quality, especially during the day for a 1080p camera. Now, I've seen some cameras using the Sony Starvis image sensor with lower bit rate, like 10 megabits per second, and they look worse than this. So I think just because a camera has a better image sensor doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get great video quality just because of that sensor. If they're using really low bit rate, then that's going to hold it back. And for a camera with the Sony Exmor IMX323 sensor, I'd say they were wise to try to get at least 14 megabits per second, because again, I think the video quality does look pretty good, especially for a camera that's only $60 and has built-in Wi-Fi with a Wi-Fi app. So this is a pretty impressive camera by itself without the rear camera. Now, I am judging this all based on the hardware this camera has and the price, because of course there are better cameras out there. You know, you could spend hundreds of dollars more and get a 4K camera like the Blackview 4K camera, and of course it's going to look better, but for the price and hardware, this camera I think does have good video quality. Now, the rear camera, unfortunately, it's only 720p like I mentioned before, and it's just, it leaves a lot to be desired. Now, I have a Prius, and my rear cameras do install on that little weird quarter window under the spoiler, so it might actually look better on my car than other cars. But regardless, I did wash this window actually just less than 12 hours before. It's just with the weather, it's been really rainy lately. It's hard to keep it clean, and I would have to clean it every half hour of driving, and I do drive a lot for work. But there you can see you can read a license plate when the car is right up against it, but as soon as you pull away, it gets pretty hard to read. Within 10-15 feet it's a blur, and that's just because of the video quality or resolution is too low. Now when it comes to the night quality, again with the Sony Exmor IMX323 image sensor, it's about what I was hoping for. With that higher 14 megabit per second bit rate, I think it does give good video quality for what this hardware and price point is offering. Now, even in really dark roads, I think the brightness is pretty decent. I have mentioned before, I believe my HID headlights on this car does help it out a little bit, so it might not look as good as cars with standard bulbs, but overall I was satisfied. Now again, unfortunately, with the rear camera with that really low resolution. It just does not look that great, and at night it's going to be even worse unless you're driving around in well-lit areas. So that is to be expected with most rear cameras though. Like, you don't have headlights shining behind you, so you got to rely on the street lights. But regardless, it's, you know, pretty disappointing. Now, one of the better features of this camera is the Wi-Fi app. Several companies, including companies like DDPi, are including these Wi-Fi apps on really affordable cameras, and you can see here they offer these sort of social media functionalities that let you share your dashcam videos with the community, and it's pretty all well developed. I'm pretty impressed. Now, I'm not connected to the internet while I was recording this, so some of this stuff isn't going to show up properly, but here you can see, again, I'm not connected properly to the internet, but you could check out your travel data on this page. And then, of course, you can connect to the camera and view a live feed. Now, with you can, of course, switch between the front and rear camera. Helps you set your angle. But also, like I mentioned before, if you do connect that red wire from the rear camera to your parking lights, then, or reversing lights, then it will show parking lines while you're viewing this app. I don't personally think the parking line feature is very useful at all. I would only use the rear camera as a rear dash camera, and that's it. But here you can see you can check all your video files like most other apps, and it is very easy to use. I recently reviewed the DDPi Mix 3, and I didn't really like how that app ran. The way you downloaded files was really bizarre. With this app, you can just select a file, click download, and it actually downloads in the background. So I really like that feature. While it's downloading in the background, you can start watching other files. Now, it went a little slow here, and it is pretty high bitrate at over 14 megabits per second, but it also might have been going a little slow because I was downloading a file in the background. But I like this ability much more than the DDPi Mix 3, which I just reviewed or released my review last week. And here you'll be able to see, you can check your download list and it'll display, there you go, the file I was downloading in the background. So I think this method was much more streamlined. Now, since there is no screen on this camera, you are going to have to change all of your settings through the app. And there are quite a lot of settings, as you can see here. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them, like the ADAS settings, which I don't even personally use for reasons I've listed over and over. They just don't seem that helpful to me. But also there's the parking monitor mode, there's white balance, there's different image settings. The settings are quite in-depth compared to a lot of other cameras I've tested recently. In the past, a lot of cameras had all of these settings, and I feel like some companies have streamlined it and took a lot of these options out because a lot of consumers don't mess with them. But I honestly think that they should leave them in there and allow people to tweak them to their liking if they choose to. So I do like that HaloCam included all of those features. Now, some of those features, like I said, the ADAS feature, the reason I don't really care for it is something like an alert that you're coming up on, or you're about to hit a car or run a stop sign doesn't really do anything without emergency braking. All it's going to do is beep, and if you're falling asleep, I don't think that's going to be quick enough to wake you up and save you from crashing. I think it's a false sense of security, and so many cameras include that feature, and I just really do not like it, and I don't recommend it, because I think advanced driver awareness systems need to be tied into the car's system and include stuff like emergency braking and lane keep assist. Otherwise, it's just glorified features just that companies love to put on their box to notch off. I don't mean to just hate on this camera for having that feature, because a lot of cameras have it, and once in a while I like to reiterate why I really don't like it. But overall, I would have to say that the base camera for $60 is a great deal. I thought the video quality was very decent for a $60 camera with a Sony image sensor and a Wi-Fi app that is very in-depth, very useful. I didn't have any issues with it. I liked downloading files from it. It seemed very streamlined, and the Wi-Fi feature didn't seem to detract from the video quality because it still had 14 megabits per second. Now, of course, I did say that I didn't really like the rear camera a whole lot because it was, just 720p, and the fact that the rear camera is $29 when the main camera is $60 is a little funny how expensive that rear camera is. There might be some other better 2-channel cameras for slightly more, like the Aki, I believe DR01. I've never used it, but I've heard very good things, so it's worth checking out if you're looking for a good 2-channel camera. But even if you want this camera with the rear camera, I would say it's still a pretty good deal. The benefit of this camera is the low cost of entry to just buy the main camera, and then if you would like to add a rear camera later, you can buy it for $29. So if you're on a budget for a 2-channel camera, and maybe you can only afford $60 right now, buy the main camera, buy the front one, and then later add the second rear camera. Now, the parking mode isn't super advanced. It doesn't have any sort of advanced pre-buffered automatic parking mode like Blackview or Thinkware or a lot of other Korean cameras, but it does use the OBD cable, which is separate, and it does have low voltage protection, so you're not going to drain your battery and have a dead battery every morning. So, those are features I wasn't able to test, but they're available. Overall, I think this camera is a good value. It seems like they really looked at the dashcam market, looked at what people wanted, and besides the 720p and the rear camera, which I wish they could bump that up with the next model to 1080p, this is a great camera. HaloCam, for the first camera I've used from them, I am pretty impressed, and I'm pretty happy with it. So overall, that's my review of this camera. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys enjoyed this video or any of my other videos, I of course would appreciate if you hit like and subscribe. I will include links down in the description where you can purchase this camera and other affiliate links of mine that do help support this channel. And of course, as usual, drive safe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.